What's up, everybody? Welcome, dissidents one and all, to the Do Dissidents podcast matinee edition, Thursday, November 17th at 4 p.m. Eastern. Keaton Weiss here with Russell Dobular.
Hello.
All right. Well, we have a very packed show this afternoon. You know, it's a week after the midterms. You figure things are going to slow down, but no such luck. No such luck at all.
Well, no, that's like when something is falling from a great height, it gains acceleration.
Yeah. Well,
that's the country. Week. It's just
yeah. Well, we have some developments. Obviously, the Republicans have officially taken the House, which means the Democrats will be the minority party heading into the next session. And obviously, Nancy Pelosi just announced earlier this afternoon that she will not be seeking re-election as party leader. Instead, she is going to be passing the torch to the next generation. If you Google Nancy Pelosi next generation, you will see a bunch of headlines.
You will get a picture of Patrick Stewart.
Yeah, right, exactly. Bunch of headlines come up. This is from The Guardian. Pelosi to depart as top House Democrat to make way for a new generation. The outgoing Speaker, 82, who has led House Democrats for 2 decades, makes announcement after the Republicans win control. And she says, with great confidence in our caucus, I will not seek re-election to Democratic leadership in the next Congress. For me, the hours come for a new generation to lead the Democratic caucus that I so deeply respect, and I'm grateful that so many are ready and willing to shoulder this awesome responsibility. Now, she says many are able and willing, but we all know who it's going to be. It's going to be Hakeem Jeffries from New York's 8th Congressional District. Steny Hoyer has already said he will not seek
you didn't read the whole statement. And I exited Congress and went to our satanic chamber, and Hakeem and I stripped naked and scattered the blood of the goat unto the ancient ruins put down by General Washington. That was the whole thing.
Well, she'd rather do that with Hakeem than Steny Hoyer, I'd imagine.
I would imagine. Well, that's actually why she chose him.
Yeah, that's how he got it. Right.
She wanted to see if it was true what they said about him.
Yeah, right, exactly. Hoyer, who wants to do that?
Hakeem Jeffries is a man of large hands.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. He carries a big stick. He will carry a big stick for this caucus.
And then she did her crypt keeper laugh.
Yeah, right, exactly. So he's going to be the one who takes over. Adam Schiff has already said he's not going to seek a leadership role. Steny Hoyer, another senior ranking Democrat, he's not going to seek a leadership role. Everyone knew it was going to be Hakeem Jeffries for the longest time, and it looks like that's who it's going to be. So let's take a look at what this new generation of Democratic leadership actually means, because when they say new generation of leadership, what they mean is basically a crop of younger prostitutes, right, that they're going to hoist upon the country. So this is Hakeem Jeffries' pack.
Well, they actually, they released an image of him in booty shorts on a corner.
Yeah, well, I was going to say
flagging down some Goldman Sachs executives.
Well, we'll get to that in a second. But this is Hakeem
Daddy,
Jeffries.
I'll take your hedge fund all the way inside for $20.
Well, you're not too far off. I'm going to show some materials here in just a minute. But if we take a look, Team Blue PAC is the PAC that Hakeem founded. By the way, look at these donation amounts. Click here to donate $2,500. Should we give it a shot, everybody?
Yeah, they don't want your fucking $10 donation.
No. 100, 500, 1,000, 2,500, or you can specify a different amount. But here are the board members. You have Hakeem Jeffries.
I had a poor person trying to donate $27.
Yeah, right.
Oh, Nancy, look.
Hakeem Jeffries, Democratic Caucus Chair. Josh Gottheimer, the Problem Solvers Caucus, notorious centrist Democrat. He wanted to keep the SALT tax in. That was his big thing for all the Build Back Better stuff. He wanted the rich suburban Jersey people to be able to, write off their state and local taxes on their federal taxes, which is a loophole that only applies to the rich. That's his pet cause there. Terry Sewell, the New Democrat Coalition, they are the third way.
What he believes in.
Yeah, exactly. The New Democrats are basically the third way Democrat and then Sherry Bustos, the co-chair House Democratic Steering Committee. So that's his PAC. This PAC was designed specifically to keep progressives out of the party. In this challenging redistricting cycle, Team Blue PAC will fight to protect our shared democratic values in our big tent party. We will focus on protecting Democratic members of Congress and ensuring they have the funds, infrastructure, and support needed to communicate their accomplishments and get reelected in 2022. What's really interesting about this is that despite their pledge to protect members of Congress, they actually endorsed Sean Patrick Maloney in his primary against Alessandra Biaggi, even after he forced a Democratic incumbent out of his home district. So apparently this, incumbent protection racket only applies to certain kinds of incumbents, and we're going to get into which kind of incumbent they're talking about. So let's take a look at the new generation of leadership, Hakeem Jeffries. This is from Open Secrets, which is a great website that you can go to find out where these politicians get their money from. So in the 2022 campaign cycle, the top industry donating to Hakeem Jeffries, securities and investment, $523,000. Top contributor, the Pro-Israel America PAC, $213,000. All right. Top contributors, Pro-Israel America PAC.
Yeah, I mean, he's really going to get Kanye going.
Well, yeah, Kanye should have come after him. The Pro-Israel America PAC, NORPAC, which is another pro-Israel PAC, Vote Sane PAC, obviously, as you could tell, a centrist
Kanye's
bipartisan
go
PAC.
DEFCON 3 when he hears about this.
Comcast Corps. There you go. And the American Israel Public Affairs Committee. So of the three top five here, three of these are Israel PACs. This one, obviously, and NORPAC is basically an American Israel PAC as well. The top industries donating to Hakeem Jeffries, the next generation of progressive leadership. Securities and investment, $523,000. Pro-Israel, $459,000. Real estate, $344,000. Lawyers and law firms, $266,000, and lobbyists, of course, $239,000. Now, not only are these both pretty dreadful lists of interests that have funded Hakeem Jeffries in this last cycle, but you also might think, hey, this is a lot of money that this guy's bringing in. Maybe he was in a swing district and he needed a lot of money to win re-election. Well, no. Hakeem Jeffries won re-election 72-27. There was no chance in hell that Hakeem Jeffries was ever going to lose.
His opponent was named Yuri in a very anti-Russian, Russophobic moment.
And he was running against the Yuri, too, on top of that.
The Shevsky. I mean, that's a tough one. It's a tough one in this climate.
If Hakeem Jeffries is winning by this margin, what that means is that these donations are not donations. These donations are bribes. They are not intended to help him win re-election. They are intended to steer him once he does. If you take a look here, the final chart I'll show, this is total amount raised by Hakeem Jeffries. Those are the blue charts there. And then the average amount raised per Democrat in this cycle. So if you notice, since Hakeem Jeffries has been floated for either Speaker, or in this case, since there's probably never going to be another Democratic Speaker of the House ever again, Majority Leader. Since he's been floated for that, look at how much money he's raised compared to the average Democrat. So in this cycle, when Democrats probably will only end up losing the House by 1 or 2 seats, Hakeem Jeffries, in a race that he won 72-28, raised $5.6 million, raised double what the average Democrat raised. So maybe some of this money, if it was so important to maintain the House, to codify Roe versus Wade, maybe some of this extra money here off the top could have been diverted to Democrats running challenging races. But of course, the explanation goes back to what I said. These are not donations intended to help him win. These are donations intended to influence him once he does. Hakeem Jeffries is as corrupt a prostitute as there is in Washington, D.C., and this is the next generation of Democratic leadership that Nancy Pelosi is passing the baton to.
Yeah, well, that's, it's like the Emperor and Darth Vader. It's a very, when I left you, I was but a student. Now I am the master. That's complete. Who else would Nancy Pelosi pass it on to? somebody who's not corrupt, that would be like a rebuke to her entire career.
Yeah. Well, I mean, look, the thing is, it's just, I mean, this is something that a lot of the corporate Democrats use. They say, well, we're going to pass it down to a new generation.
Yeah.
As if people just take for granted that the new generation is more progressive than the old generation, right? The new generation of Democrats.
Now, Keaton, representation is important. We're going from a rich old white lady from San Francisco to a rich young black man from New York.
From Brooklyn, right.
That's progress.
Exactly. Progress of a kind. By the way, in case you're curious, it's funny, you know, sometimes you can just look up, you know, because the Open Secrets is a great site. You could check out any politician you want. So we all saw, you know, Hakeem Jeffries, you know, $500,000 from, you know, securities and investment and, you know, Comcast. And if you go down the list, I mean, we didn't look at the top 20. We only looked at the top 5. Blackstone is on there. You know, all the usual suspects are on there. And then you just for the hell of it.
Comcast, which last I looked, it could have changed by now. Its employees rated it the worst company to work for in America.
Yeah, well, that wouldn't surprise me. I do believe I recall that also. But you can Google anybody, right? So if you look at a guy like Bernie, his top industry, retired people, old people who don't work anymore. He raised $2 million from them from 2017 to 2022. His top institutional donor is the University of California for $29,000 compared to all those numbers that we just saw from Hakeem Jeffries. With AOC, it's a similar thing, although actually both of them do take money from Alphabet, which owns Google. And look, even Kaiser Permanente showed a little love to Bernie Sanders to the tune of $11,000. So, you know, no one's got their hands totally clean. But just compare that.
Well, you know, in case Bernie ever actually does start hanging people in Central Park, they want to be on the right side of that.
Yeah.
Look, we donated. We were with you the whole time.
Exactly. So there you have it. That's the direction that the Democrats are headed in. And I hesitate to say this as a point of contrast because it's not really a point of contrast in the sense that the Republicans really have yet to elaborate on what they mean by a working class party of working class people in any way that makes any sort of economic sense. Nonetheless, there was an attempt made. I should say there has been an attempt made by some in the Republican Party in the wake of these disappointing midterms to try and emphasize the need for a change in leadership. And when you contrast this to the Democrats, you can just, you know, it's a pretty stark contrast in how each of these parties handle losing. You've already heard people in Congress saying that they're not going to vote for Kevin McCarthy to be Speaker. Whether they'll have enough votes to block him is doubtful, but they are at least making some noise there. And we also had Josh Hawley appear on the Tucker Carlson show recently. And so we're going to play a little bit of a clip here. Before I play the video, as you can see, Tucker Carlson's hormone reassignment surgery is going very, very well. I mean, he looks fantastic. I mean, he looks beautiful.
He does. I never thought he was going to pick that side of the gender debate.
Yeah, I mean, you know, that's probably why he's covered it so much, because he was considering doing it, and he wanted to make sure he was safe.
He was floating trial balloons.
Yeah, but he looks fantastic. He looks wonderful. Happened so quickly.
The libertarians are backing him up.
Yeah. Yeah, but I mean, he must have found a good surgeon because he looks fantastic. That red, he looks great in red.
Yeah.
He's even got the little streak in his hair.
Hey, man, who doesn't love a little Cruella de Vil?
Right, exactly. You know, he's probably thinking to himself, why is it that only women get to pee sitting down? I want to pee sitting down. Why is it that only women get to scroll their phone while they pee?
Yeah.
I can only scroll my phone while I'm doing a number 2. Women get to do it whether they're doing number 1 or number 2. That's not fair. Does that make me a sexist? Does that make me a male chauvinist? No. I would like to pee. And then he thought, you know what? While I'm at it, you know, it looks kind of stupid for a man to pee sitting down. So maybe I should just go all the way. And look, it came out great.
All the way.
He's doing great.
It's working.
God bless him. God bless him. We want to show nothing but love for Tucker Carlson on his gender reassignment journey. And I think he looks fantastic. And anybody who makes fun of him is not welcome on this channel.
You're an ist.
Yeah, you're an ist. Go find somewhere else. Go find somewhere else.
You're all the ists.
You're every single one of them.
Yeah,
anyway.
Cool Blue says, but it's the R's who are fascist. Yeah.
Thank you for the $1.99, Cool Blue.
Thank you for the $1.99. I have a 99-cent store in my neighborhood. I can buy 2 things.
Exactly. Buy a chips and soda.
And I can have a penny left over.
There you go. All right, let's hear what Josh Hawley has to say on the direction of the Republican Party post-midterm.
Well, we need good, strong, independent leadership that actually listens to voters and doesn't just listen to the Washington lobbyists. And I'll just tell you, when it comes to the GOP, the Washington Republicanism that cares more about Wall Street than it does about working people, it's time for that to come to an end. The Washington Republicanism that's all about adventures abroad, the neoconservatism of these global wars, not focused on working people in this country, it needs to come to an end. I think what voters are asking us to do is pretty clear. Secure our streets. Let's put new cops on the street, 100,000 of them. Secure the borders. Stop the indoctrination of our children and bring jobs back to this country. It used to be you could support a family on one good wage. You can't do that anymore in this country because of the ruinous trade policies that unfortunately both parties have supported. That has got to come to an end. Republicans have got to be the party of working people and working class culture. That's what we're fighting for.
All right, working people and working class culture. Now, if you notice, the first 3 things that he said there are sort of culture war topics that he thinks will appeal to working class people. That's why he couches it in working class culture. And then he says, and then he mentions the very real problem that you can't raise a family on one income anymore. And that's a real problem. But then he blames it all on the trade deals. Now, the trade deals had a lot to do with that in certain parts of the country.
Part of it.
But that's a bit of a bullshit sandwich there, right? He's sticking the problem in between a bunch of sort of solutions.
They love that one because it doesn't require social programs.
Right, exactly.
To address, right? You can do a lot of hot rhetoric about China and Canada stealing our milk or something. You can go in that direction with that.
Right. I mean, that's not a threat to capitalism. What that basically suggests,
or their whole economic theory since Reagan.
Right. I mean, what he's saying there is basically that we're not going to upend any sort of capitalist system that keeps people where they're at. Pardon me, in terms of not being able to raise a family on one income or anything like that. He's basically saying we are going to act as agents for our people rather than the sort of neutral arbiters of a global economic landscape, which is how the Democrats have thought of themselves. And there is a lot of appeal there. I'm not saying that won't work. And all things being equal, a lot of people are going to go for that as opposed to the Obama, Pelosi, or now Jeffries brands of neoliberalism, but it's not something that we could actually endorse as a real solution. But it is interesting to notice how, in the days after this, there is much more chatter on the Republican side about how they need a change in leadership than there ever is on the Democratic side when they lose. I mean, Pelosi saying she's stepping down now because it's time for a new generation to take over. She would have likely stepped down anyway.
Right.
Right.
Sure. She was getting ready to pack it in.
Yeah, she was getting ready. If they miraculously held the House this time, she'd have probably stuck it out for 2 more years. But then she would have packed it in anyway.
Sure. But to be in the minority, fuck it. She's got a corrupt goon who, has sucked on corruption at her wrinkled teat. So she's fine. She's fine with that. She's fine.
Exactly.
With that. There's a continuity in corruption.
Exactly. And we'll see how everything goes in terms of Republican leadership.
He's never going to stop her
this.
From being able to trade as a congresswoman. He's not going to get any ideas. He's not going to go off the farm.
Oh no, he's perfect. He's a perfect choice. He's a perfect choice for them to be next in line. You could see it coming a mile away, And, I got a text from a friend of mine. We're not Woodward and Bernstein here by any means, but, I do have a source who knows people in these circles. And that person did text me earlier.
When we say deep throat, we're talking about what went down in Tijuana that we are not allowed to talk about with the wife.
Yeah, well, I wanted to make I had a T-shirt in mind. Speaking of that I would like to sell at a Trump rally called "The Deep State Can Deep Throat My Big Tech."
Yeah.
That would be
It's pretty good.
it's not bad, right?
Yeah,
it's a little long.
Hang on,
T-shirt.
that's yours. That's yours.
Yeah, I came up with
because
it.
eventually we're going to
Just
get
made me
into
think of it.
eventually we're going to get into merch, and that's pretty good.
Yeah, I think that would be a great shirt to sell on our store.
Yeah, John to Emily wants to see me in a dress and wig. You and everybody else. That is, I in the words of Woody Allen, I happen to have the kind of body that attracts both sexes.
Yeah, exactly. And John to Emily loves peeing sitting down. See, that's what I'm saying.
I only had to
saying.
do that the night I spent in prison because they made me.
There's a lot of appeal. I mean, now with the rise of social media, I think peeing sitting down is going to catch on. Because people are going to want to, if you're at work and you sneak off to the bathroom, you want to take that time to scroll your phone. And if you're a man, you can't really do that at a urinal. Right? You gotta
also,
sit down.
Americans are getting so unhealthy and obese, they're not really able to stand at the toilet for very long anymore.
Yeah, that's true. But if you're at a urinal, you can lean on the wall.
You can. Yeah, it's inconvenient.
My kids are already starting the lean. Because we have little urinals that we put to train
them.
Because
they see you doing it.
Yeah, they go like this. They have the slap. They put their arm up on the wall like this, and they lean over, just like like a 55-year-old man. They're quick learners. All right, do you have to go do something? You wanted me to rip before our next segment?
Well, Josh Hawley, we want to finish up on him now.
Oh yeah, that's right. Russell put together.
So Josh Hawley, if you remember, he was kind of the anointed one. Josh Hawley was kind of the original MAGA communist. He was the first one kind of trying to paw his way towards some kind of post-Reaganomics Republican Party. And me and Keaton, actually, a lot of our early shows, we talked about how much potential he had. But then he fucked it all up on January 6th. He is never living this down. He literally cheered on the rioters and then fled from them once he saw what he had wrought. They don't teach you how to deal with such things at his Harvard alumni, at his Harvard alma mater rather.
All right, do you have to go do something? You wanted me to riff?
I'll be right back.
All right, Russell will be right back. In the meantime, I'm going to get our plugs in. I want to invite everyone to go to patreon.com/DoDissidents and help support our program. Here is the patron scroll going across the bottom of the screen. When you go to patreon.com, you help us continue to do as many of these streams as we can fit into the week. We did a live stream, a fun one that most of you guys showed up for, I think. It was a sort of mystery science theater stream on Trump's big announcement for 2024, which he made on Tuesday night. So that was a lot of fun. And so everybody who showed up to that, thank you very much for doing that. And yeah, the more members we get at Patreon or Substack, you can go to dodissidents.substack.com. The more often we can jump on here and do the best show that we can for you guys. And so thank you guys very much for doing that. We're going to take a couple of chats here. We have a super chat that I have to read because it's a super chat. But in order to keep the YouTube gods happy, I'm simply going to read it mentally. I'm not going to recite it, and I'm certainly not going to respond to it. But here it is. We have to put it up. All I will say to this is thank you, Franklin, for the $5. Aside from that, I have no comment on that. I have nothing to say about that whatsoever. Absolutely nothing. I cannot respond to that. But I have to put it up because you donated. And I thank you very much for doing that. Let's see. Sure, Keaton always pees sitting down. You know, it's not that I pee sitting down by default. My default is still to stand. But I'm at the point now where, like, if I think there's a chance there could be some other business to attend to while I'm in there, I will sit down just in case to have an excuse to read my phone. I will. If it's borderline, I will now err on the side of, hey, you know what? Maybe there's, a movement coming on. Let me sit for a minute and see. And so in that case, yeah, I'll sit down and I'll do research for the show. See, when you do a show like this, you have to check Twitter, 3 or 4 times a day, right? I mean, you have to really be on top of things. And so every chance you get to scroll that phone and check. And when you're a family man, as I am, it's not easy to check Twitter throughout the day. Because if you check Twitter, when you're supposed to be cooking dinner or when you're supposed to be watching the kids or when you're supposed to be taking the garbage out, right? Then, married people will know. You get a little bit of mouth from the missus, Why are you on your phone all day? What are you doing? Why don't you pay attention to what you're doing? Why don't you be more present, right? And so when you're in the bathroom, that is your opportunity.
What did he say about me?
To go and do research for the show. And so that is why I was just explaining to the audience, Russell, that sometimes I will pee sitting down if I feel that there may be some other thing coming down the pipes, if you know what I mean.
Oh, everybody does that.
Yeah. Oh, so see,
Sure.
Yeah.
Look, man, I am as regular as a fucking Timex, man.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's my morning constitutional. I'll be sitting there on the phone.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what I was saying,
somebody said they trade crypto sitting on the toilet, which
yeah, you could do that too.
Yeah,
you can do that too.
That's what Bankman-Fried did. That's how he lost his company.
Yeah. Politico. Lee Zeldin moves closer to RNC chair. That is due to his strong performance in the 2022 New York governor's race. That'd be interesting. That would actually be interesting for them to pick a blue stater to lead the RNC. That'd be an interesting choice.
He's a pro-life blue stater.
Yeah, that's true. But that would be an interesting choice. And look,
they need to deal with this fucking abortion problem. They got a serious problem with Roe. It is such a problem that in this election, it, forgive the expression, trumped all the culture issues that people loathe the Democrats for. And actually, Crystal did a monologue today about a study they did showing that Trump cost them like 5 to 7 points everywhere. That without Trump, they actually probably would have had the predicted red wave.
Wow, that's interesting. I didn't see that.
Yeah, no, they were showing how districts that that were Republican, they just didn't really gain much. And if they had a MAGA candidate, they really didn't gain a lot, like 0.7% over the 2020 election. So the MAGA candidates fucking killed them. The Trump presence killed them because of the independents. They lost with independents. Just en masse were like, no. We're not voting for these fucking screwballs. Yep. With Republicans, yeah, like with really, really, really Republican districts, like districts with like no independents, yeah, they did up their numbers. That's why you have that 5 million larger vote count for Republicans for Congress overall.
And that will come down, by the way, as all of California's votes are counted. It's not going to end there.
Sure.
But it's going to be close.
But
they did win on the generic ballot pretty impressively, yeah.
Right. It looks like they're going to come in at about 4% more of the overall popular vote.
Right.
And that is because, yeah, man, those hardcore Republicans did go in on Stop the Steal, but you can't win on that.
Right. Exactly.
Because those are districts they had anyway.
Exactly. And in that sense, there were the makings of a red wave potentially if they didn't alienate the independents, because the fact that they're winning on the generic ballot by 4 points means Republicans did turn out more than Democrats did. Right? The hardcore partisans on each side, the hardcore red teamers turned out in greater numbers and in greater force than the hardcore blue teamers. What killed them was, as Russell said, the independents. And that's why you saw them not put up margins in those rural and suburban areas the way they're used to. Because independents are still the plurality of the country.
And it was the MAGAs.
Right.
The MAGAs destroyed them in those swing districts. That's really the takeaway. So look, that's the end of Trump's career in politics, essentially. I mean, they got to be fucking suicidal. I don't think the primary base, Republicans like to win. They like to win. And the more those numbers are spread around, hey, look, we would have blown out the Democrats if not for Mr. fucking gold toilet over here. We're doing a lot of toilet bits today.
Yeah, a lot of bathroom humor today. Well, especially when you were
gone. We're not
gone.
Usually so scatological.
You left me hanging for a few minutes. I had to riff. I did all bathroom humor. You'll have to play that back.
This is not usually. We usually run a much cleaner show than this.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. We're known as we're a very highbrow show.
We're not the 11 o'clock. We're the 7 o'clock usually.
Yeah, we're actually the alternate for Amy Goodman. When she can't make it, they stream this show on NPR.
They bring us on.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. They just play this feed. That's how clean it usually is.
John Emmerich pees sitting down all the time.
I know. That's what she was saying. Pardon me. Earlier she's saying peeing sitting down is great. And I said that's a real plus. That's a real plus. You know. Because I was saying it now is okay. So I'm going to do this for Russell's benefit. I was explaining to the audience, as a family man, I don't get to scroll my phone much because you have to, you might get in trouble with the wife if you're scrolling your phone when you should be cooking or cleaning or taking the garbage out or watching the kids
or pretending to listen to how our day was.
Yeah, right. Yeah, exactly. But we have to be on our phone in order to research for the show. You got to be on, Facebook, Twitter, Reddit. You got to see what's going on multiple times a day. Got to keep checking in, otherwise you miss it. So the peeing sitting down thing, yes, I think that has a lot going for it. Anyway, let's do a segment on Dave Chappelle that we can actually keep up on YouTube. How about that?
That would be nice.
That'd be nice get this time. Yeah, that we won't get throttled. So by now, you've all seen, anyone who cares, the Dave Chappelle monologue on Saturday Night Live, where he gave a quasi-defense of Kanye's statements. Not so much a defense of his statements, but he expressed a sentiment that perhaps the response was too harsh, compared to what he actually said. We are not allowed, as our devoted fans know, to play any of that monologue. But by now, it's been, 5 days. If you were interested in watching it, you will have watched it. We all know what the story is. And so Jon Stewart appeared on his old pal Stephen Colbert's show this week, and the topic came up. Now, like NBC, CBS is also notoriously strict about people streaming their content, and so we cannot play any of Jon Stewart's comments, but I took the time to create these lovely graphics with quotes of what he said. So I'm going to read Jon Stewart's take on this, which I actually thought was quite good. So this is split up into two different slides here. He says, "I'm afraid that the general tenor of conversation in this country is to cover it up, bury it, put it to the outskirts, and don't deal with it. And what I would say is, look at it from a black perspective. If a culture that feels that its wealth has been extracted by groups, whites, Jews, whether it's true or not isn't the issue, that's the feeling in that community. And if you don't understand where it is coming from, then you can't deal with it. And you can't sit down and explain that being in an industry isn't the same as having a nefarious and controlling interest and intention. And that has been the anti-Semitic trope. But you need to be able to meet people from what their community is feeling as well." And I think that's a very good and sensible take.
That was exactly what I said in the sequence that now has gone into the vault.
Yes, that's more or less what you said. But, when you've been doing this stuff for as long as Stewart has, he can crystallize it and say it in 30 seconds, where it takes us longer to get to that main point.
Takes us longer and a lot of family revelations.
Right, exactly. But he makes the specific point, and it's a very good point, that black people in this country rightfully feel like their wealth has been extracted from them. We have Marcel Dixon on the show a few times. We had him on our election night special where it erupted into a big debate about the treatment of the descendants of African slaves versus the treatment of how he calls them illegal immigrants. And he's very upset that the system makes certain concessions for immigrant groups that he feels have not been made for his people. And, you know, the same concept is at work here. It doesn't justify the anti-Semitism, as Stewart says when he says here, explain that being in an industry isn't the same as having a nefarious and controlling interest and intention, and that has been the trope. So he's not denying that certain bigoted tropes come out of real concerns. But what he's saying is sometimes you have to just listen and hear the stuff that you're offended by in order to get a sense of where people are coming from. And once you get a sense of where they're coming from, you can cut through the tropes and the bigoted statements and have a conversation. And you can't get anywhere if you don't do that, which is why what he says here, the general tenor of conversation is to cover it up, bury it, put it to the outskirts, and don't deal with it. And that is the liberal class's approach to everything. They don't want to hear anything that they disagree with. And guys like Chappelle are especially challenging because they can't just say, oh, look at this privileged white man saying this thing. Right? They have to deal with the sort of conflicting interests between minority groups who they all want to virtue signal to constantly. Right? They want to be the ally party. And when shit like this wells up, they can't be the ally party because now they have to pick and choose. Ooh, do we take the black person's side or do we take the Jewish person's side? What do we do?
And listen, and this is why I said on the segment that we did on this, that this is a more common feeling in the black community than not, because I have talked to very mainstream, liberal, professional class black people about Dave Chappelle, and they like what he's saying. They like what he's saying. I mean, these are people who would, you know, puberty block their kids in a second, who are completely on the whole liberal program, right? And yeah, man, what he had to say in the closer about being able to invoke a privilege as a gay person that you can as a black person, they totally found that relatable.
Let's just explain, because don't forget that segment has been vaulted. In his bit, he talked about how he got into an altercation with a gay person at a bar and they threatened to call the police. And he said, well, isn't that funny how, you know, you're gay until it's time to be white again? Because as a black person, he wouldn't feel comfortable calling the cops.
Right. Now, people who came at that and said, heathen, shut it down. You know what, man? Yeah, like liberal class black people, like She the People Essence Conference kind of black people, they don't want to fuck up their careers. So they're not going to out loud tell you, oh yeah, that's some shit right there. He's telling the truth right there. That's what a lot of people in that community think. I know from listening to people in that community. What he said there about Kanye and about there kind of being a double standard. Yeah, man, I feel that he did play on certain anti-Semitic tropes, and he did go too easy on Kanye. This isn't the first time with Kanye. This is going on for literally decades with Kanye. So you can't say, oh, as soon as he said something about the Jews, that was it. No, man, he's been saying shit like this a long fucking time before he faced any meaningful consequences. And as I said in the other segment, you can't say, well, what if a Jewish person said something equivalent about the black community? They wouldn't face those consequences. You're damn right they would face those consequences in 5 seconds. So you can't say this is out of balance. However, Chappelle, you know, just to recap a little of what we talked about in the original segment, I owned a couple of theaters up in Harlem, and I was right at the intersection of a lot of what he is venting here. I can tell you, because I was on the receiving end of it, A lot of African Americans have a lot of anti-Semitic feelings, and that is partly going back to there's a history, particularly in New York, where more Jews immigrated than any place else on planet Earth other than Israel. They were shut out of a lot of professions and they weren't educated when they got here. And they went into businesses where that would have them. So the real estate was cheap in these neighborhoods of very often people of color. And they bought a lot of apartment buildings up in Harlem. So who do you hate more than the landlord, right? Everybody hates the fucking landlord, especially poor people, right? So you got a black neighborhood full of Jewish landlords. Of course, this instigated certain anti-Semitism, and exactly what Keaton's saying, this feeling of, or what Stewart said, that there's a feeling in that community that their wealth has been extracted. Look, I put a post on Facebook about 2 months before the George Floyd riots erupted, and it was early in the pandemic. I was in my local supermarket, and this isn't aimed at Jews. This was aimed at the Latinos who own the supermarket. Somebody in the supermarket, and it was a very tense atmosphere. If you remember, those first months of the pandemic were extremely tense in public spaces because nobody really knew what was going on, how infectious it was, if they're going to go home and die from going to buy some stuff at the store. Like, it was a very tense atmosphere. And he started going off, charging these motherfucking prices in a black neighborhood. Why don't black people own this supermarket? Why aren't these businesses black owned? And you hear that a lot in Harlem, man. But I had never seen anyone go off like that in the middle of the supermarket. And I went home and I wrote a post saying, we're going to have race riots. We're going to have race riots. Like, the country is a tinderbox, and this is the spark. This pandemic that's going to set off an explosion. So what Stewart is saying there is exactly right. You're not going to make these things go away by censoring Dave Chappelle, by forcing people not to say these things, by forcing people not to express it. If anything, because we have a culture that does that, I don't think a lot of people are really aware of this. There are a lot of feelings and attitudes in the black community that people are not aware of for that reason, because they're not allowed to say it. You know, you're talking about a population that's used to having the culture come down on them like a ton of bricks, right? So anything that they know is going to cause a lot of blowback, most of them won't say. Chappelle is saying something that is a very common feeling in that community, which Stewart is clearly aware of. His whole take on it is built around the fact that, you know, he's indicating he's had people say things like that to him over the course of his career.
Well, yeah, look, a lot of Jewish people are aware of it. I am, Russell, you are. You know, Jews are concentrated in cities, which is also where a lot of the African American population is in this country. So Jewish people, black people, like, we occupy similar spaces, right? And so we all get it. We all, like, this is, once again, all of these sort of like pearl clutching about this comes from liberal class people who don't run into a lot of blacks or Jews in their daily lives. You know what I mean? Like, they're the only ones who don't really get what's going on here.
Right.
And Gene said something that I just want to second, because I said this in our vaulted segment. She says, I'm so sick of all the identity politics. It distracts us from important issues and prevents the creation of a common agenda. Yes, this is what I said, and this is what I think is not helpful about Chappelle when he does this stuff. And like I said, that's not to say it'll go away if he stops doing it. So I'm not saying he can't do it. But to me, I mean, what Russell said about Chappelle a couple weeks ago, or not a couple weeks ago, 5 days ago at this point, he said Chappelle is really the most intersectional comedian out there. And he's right about that, in the sense that Chappelle speaks to a lot of the conflicting interests and attitudes between minority groups. But I would counter that by saying,
it doesn't fit the narrative. The narrative they want is evil white men who like to sleep with women, destroy everything, and everyone else is on the same side. Right?
here's the thing about
there's
that,
the
though.
evil white man, and everyone else has the same interests.
But here's the thing about that. Intersectionality is defined as this sort of web of dynamics, this web of oppressor, victim,
but that's
subjugator
not how they usually
dynamic.
frame it.
It's not
they
how
usually
they frame
it as like the white people are the oppressor.
Absolutely.
And when there are conflicting interests between anyone who's not a heterosexual white person, like heterosexual white women kind of get thrown in with us if they do anything they don't like. It's the white feminist. They'll make them white. Oh, well, they think white. They've internalized whiteness. They're white adjacent. They won't deal with it as this group has interests of their own that are in conflict with this social project. They will never address it in that way, from what I've seen. So they don't take their own intersectional argument to its logical conclusion because it's an uncomfortable place for them.
Sure. But what I'm saying is take intersectionality for what it actually means, which is what I just said. This is why I think intersectionality is dumb. I think it's stupid. I think it's harmful. I don't think we should view society as a interconnected web of oppression and subjugation and victimhood. To me, that's anti-human. To me, what you need is human solidarity.
Sure.
In order to take power from those who have it and give it to those who don't. To me, this whole sort of intersectional worldview really does not have a critique of power that it thinks it does, because it defines power in very superficial terms.
Right.
And so I'm with you on that. Now, having said that, does that mean Chappelle isn't allowed to say what he says? No, of course not. He's an artist. He's a comic. He could say whatever he wants. And it is true that these sentiments are out there, whether he says it or not. And so when a huge name like Dave, brings these issues to light, as Jon Stewart said, it's an opportunity for a conversation, and that conversation is necessary to have. So whether you agree with what he said or don't agree with what he said or like it, don't like it, that stuff is out there no matter what. And the only way to deal with it is to sort of air it out.
I mean, this was the good Jon Stewart. As you know, I've wanted to do a segment for a while taking down some of the things he's done on his new show, which to me just really lack this. This is what I expect from Jon Stewart. Depth.
Yeah, he's a very, very smart guy. He really is. I mean, he's not. I know Ryan in the pre-show.
I don't understand some of what he's done on his show because of that. Like, I don't get it. I don't get how he doesn't see that some of the issues he's dealing with on his show are a lot more complicated than the woke take, which he tends to parrot. I don't expect that from him.
All right, so I think we covered that very concisely and very neatly.
We have somebody very upset. Cry me a river. I'm gonna read this in a Jewish way. Cry me a river. The Jewish community will not go past World War II. Many have suffered, not just Jews. Yeah, we know that.
We know that, yeah. I don't think any of what we said contradicts that in any way.
Yeah, man. People a lot of times have a knee-jerk reaction to these kinds of conversations, I think, because they might be a little anti-Semitic, to tell you the truth. Those damn Jews talking again about those gas chambers.
Right, yeah, exactly.
There have been a lot of gas. Okay, actually, that's the only case of that, but still.
And Stewart had a great line at the end of this segment, which I wish we could play, but we can't because we'll get the video fucked with. He tells Colbert, he says, like, for example, I know you don't like Jews. I could see it in your eyes. That was great.
Dude, that was the first time I've seen Stephen Colbert be funny in a bit in like 10 years.
Yeah.
He actually played that bit very well.
He said, just one. That
was actually, it's actually good. It's like he's still got a funny gene somewhere in there.
Yeah, the old team.
Buried under fucking years of shilling for the fucking establishment.
Yeah, exactly. Franklin says he liked Jon Stewart giving a medal to a Nazi recently. Well, that's a good segue into our final.
Well, that's look.
I
mean, he's putting his matzah where his mouth is. He's trying to let these things go.
Right. Yeah. Exactly. That would make the other guy happy.
Anti-Semites.
Yeah. Who was the other guy? Who was the guy who just commented that you highlighted? That would make him happy or her happy, whoever it was. Whoever it was.
Yeah. Look, Jon Stewart is ready to move on. He's giving medals to Nazis.
Right. Yeah, exactly. So how could you say he's not past World War II? He's clearly over.
Sure.
Clearly,
He's clearly over it. The guy had a Sonnenbrand tattoo going up his arm, and he gave him a medal anyway.
Water under the bridge. So everybody,
Nazis, schmazzies.
yeah, right, exactly. All right, let's do our final segment, shall we?
Let's do it, man.
All right. So everybody, one thing that happened this week that's been the source of a lot of speculation and theorizing on many different sides, a missile landed in Poland, which was strange because we originally heard that it was a Russian missile, but then NATO said, no, this wasn't a Russian missile. We believe this was a Ukrainian misfire. So that's a little strange. That's because if you look at a map, I wish I should have pulled up a graphic, but Russia is to the east of Ukraine. Poland is to the west of Ukraine.
Yeah.
So if it was a Ukrainian defense missile shooting at a Russian incoming missile, you'd think they kind of maybe shot it the wrong way. That's a little, I mean, I don't want to say it's a false flag or anything, but unless they have Wile E. Coyote running their air defense, then that's a little suspicious that it would fly the opposite direction.
I mean, if you see the debris they recovered, it did say Acme on the side.
Yeah, well, maybe that's a hint. That's a hint.
Yeah.
Because it seems
I
don't know.
There was like a big grabby arm with a hammer on the end.
Yeah. I mean, it's starting to look like Zelensky maybe a little full of, we're not allowed to say what we, Why don't we just hear from him? Let's just let him speak for himself.
How do you say it? How do you say it? World War III?
Yeah. I'm not sure. Let's just let Zelensky talk for himself. I don't think we can get thrown off the air for that. Let's just hear what he has to say. Let's hear him out.
Corrupt comedian.
Our eyes are open. We're here to listen, not to talk.
Panama Papers.
Let's hear him talk about the Russian missile attack. Well, see, it worked. He brainwashed me. I said Russian missile attack. See? So there you go. Happy YouTube.
That's how it works.
That's how it works.
You're turning into a pod person.
Yeah, exactly. Right. I'm becoming a pro. Yeah. Getting good at this, everybody. All right, let's hear what he has to say.
А сьогодні російські ракети ударили по Польщі, по території нашої дружньої країни. Загинули люди. Прийміть, будь ласка, співчуття від усіх українських братів. Скільки разів Україна говорила про те, що нашою країною держава-терорист не обмежиться. Польща, держави Балтії – це питання часу, коли б російський терор пішов далі. Треба поставити на місце терориста.
All right, so there you have him saying, obviously, this was a Russian attack. And obviously the significance, I mean, most of you guys know this already, but the significance of Russians firing a missile into Poland, if that's in fact what they did.
Say, as somebody with some knowledge of film theory, this is very Leni Riefenstahl, the way that they shot this, right? It's
I see what you're saying.
Powerful and dominant, and they shot up at him that way.
Yes.
It looks like a half-assed attempt to make him look powerful.
Yeah, and for those who, a more mainstream reference would be the Inglourious Bastards movie. When they have the big premiere at the end, and you see the framing of those shots in the Nazi propaganda film. That's what he's talking about there. And you're right, the framing was just like that. But anyway, obviously, the significance of Russia firing a missile into Poland, if in fact they did, is that Poland is a NATO country, and so that would give you, excuse me, what was it? Sorry, the RSV flu's going around. It kicked in just in time there. I don't know, but yeah, that would be a pretty significant thing if they did that. So, as it turns out, however, NATO has said that actually they believe that this missile was a Ukrainian missile that was errantly fired to defend against a Russian missile. Again, how they were that far off, if you look at a map, really difficult to see. Right? I mean, for all the billions of dollars we're giving them, they should be able to fire it a little straighter than, to miss in the opposite direction by whatever it is, 900 miles. But anyway, like I said,
Well,
we don't want to
with
speculate.
the what are we sending them another 67 billion? Maybe they'll get it straightened out.
Yeah, maybe they'll buy themselves a compass to make sure they're
Yeah.
firing it in the correct direction, with that money. I think that would be a good investment. You can get those pretty cheap. I think Raytheon will sell you a special militarized compass for about $13.5 million.
Well, you know what I hate when those commercials come on in the middle of the night where they show like children who can't have no sense of direction without compasses and they want you to donate.
Right.
This is a tragedy that you can prevent for only 50 cents a day.
Right.
Look at these children having no idea which way north is.
Exactly. But anyway, we want to vindicate ourselves a little bit here. Because we know we're going to get criticized for questioning whether this Zelensky guy is telling the truth about where this missile came from, because he still insists, as of today, by the way, that no,
I know
this was not a Ukrainian missile. He is not giving on this. All right, but let me just put this up here because this is interesting. So this was on the 15th. So this was a few days ago. This was sort of released around the same time that video was. Had a call with President Andrzej Duda. I hope I'm getting that name right, expressed condolences over the death of Polish citizens from Russian missile terror. We exchanged available information and are clarifying all the facts. All of Europe and the world must be fully protected from terrorist Russia. Now, if you notice, underneath there, Zelensky got a little fact-checked there on social media.
Yep.
Way to go, Elon. Doing your job over there.
Yep.
Readers added context. They thought people might want to know. The context was Poland says missile that hit it was Ukrainian stray. Isn't that a fascinating graphic? Isn't that just a fascinating graphic? This guy is the new deity of the libs who want to censor people for not telling the truth on social media and things like that. Here you have a guy who's clearly trying to whether this was a false flag or not, he's clearly trying to build the case for military intervention on the part of NATO, which would be, yes, we can say this out loud without getting canceled, World War III. That's clearly what he's trying to get going here. And he's fact-checked on Twitter saying, no, actually, that missile is not Russian missile terror. That, according to Poland and the rest of NATO, was a Ukrainian stray.
Yeah.
Pretty interesting stuff. I can only use the word interesting if we want to keep our show. But I think it's interesting. That's interesting, isn't it? Isn't it interesting how this man of unimpeachable character is this wrong about this? I think that's interesting. Because we know he's a hero, and we know he would never, do anything that's not in the best interest of his country and the world. We know he's a brave man who could have fled, and he stayed and fought. They made movie posters about him. We know what a great guy he is. So it's interesting that he would do this because we know he's such a hero. That's the thing. Like, if I didn't know he was a hero, it wouldn't surprise me that he did this. But I know he's a hero, and I'm not allowed to question whether or not he's a hero. We have to say he's a hero. And I do. I don't question that. I'm loyal. Hey, I like having our YouTube channel. I like saying the guy's a hero. I believe that 100%, which is why it's interesting to me. It's interesting. That's all I'm saying. It's interesting.
Yeah.
That these stories don't quite match up the way they should, given what a great and noble and honest guy he is. That's all I'm saying.
Yes. So I've been saying this for a while. The Ukrainians are fucking dangerous. We need to stop listening to them. They are trying to get us into World War III. I said that before this happened. And now I don't think anyone can really argue otherwise. This is what's going on with Ukrainians. They have been bullied by Russia and other powers, but mainly Russia, for fucking centuries. Russia is the big kid who keeps beating them up and stealing their lunch money. Now they got a bigger bully to fight their bully. And they want this to go all the way. So they're going to keep saying to us, you know what he said about your mother? No, he said he could kick your ass. You know what? They're going to do everything that they can to get
Putin says
us
your
to-
mama's so fat when she skips a meal, the stock market drops.
Oh my God.
What are you going to do
Yeah.
about that? You going to stand for that?
That's exactly what they're doing. I had a debate with somebody who's Ukrainian, Ukrainian American, giving so much money to Ukraine that apparently if you send them enough money, they'll put your name on a mortar and shoot a video of it and then fire it on video and send that to you. They actually had this video file. They actually streamed it. It was like talking to anyone who is working for state TV. It was actually a kind of interesting insight to me because you have these people who were dominated by the Soviet Union for so long that their mentality is the same. They think like KGB agents. So if you tell them anything that's off script or off narrative, they have a ready excuse. I brought up the Nazis in Ukraine. Oh, that's just propaganda. I was talking about the history of it. They said, well, back then, people really didn't know what the Nazis were when they joined the Nazis. This is 1943 that the Nazis went into Ukraine. They sound just like debating Russians. That's the funny thing, because the Russians will be the same way. The Russians are innocent in everything they've ever done in history, and they're a put upon victimized people. It's the same thing you'll get when you debate Ukrainians, and they will make very, very dishonest arguments. I brought up the fact that most of the American people do not want us to continue supporting this war without diplomacy. And the response was, well, that's unfortunate because they don't realize. I just hope that Putin doesn't go into Poland next and take over. They fucking know that he's not going into Poland. This is not Hitler. He doesn't have designs to take over all of Europe. How would that even happen? And they know that. This is fucking propaganda because they know that the basis of us not just saying, hey, Russia, you good with Crimea and the Donbass? Done. The argument for us not doing that is not very strong. So they have to paint these absurd scenarios. Oh, yeah, well, if you don't help, he's going to be rolling into NATO. No, he's fucking not. No, he's not. And they'll argue every side of the issue. They were arguing to me, Russia is a third-rate military power. And then 2 seconds later, well, Russia could take over all of Europe. So which is it? Which is it? Are they a third-rate military power, or are they going to take over all of Europe? They actually argued to me about nuclear war. Most of their nukes don't work anyway. We cannot listen when they say no negotiations without Ukraine, about Ukraine, without Ukraine. Why? Why exactly? We're paying for this. We're arming them. What do you mean we can't tell them that they have to negotiate? I mean, sure, technically, and we could say, well, okay, that's going to be the end of our support. If you don't want to sit
But then
down
that's
and
the end of the
negotiate,
war.
That's the end of our support. Right. Exactly. How do we not have that right? We're talking about the most corrupt nation in Europe, which again, if you talk to a fucking Ukrainian, they'll blame the Russians for that too. They'll find a way to blame the Russians for everything that's ever gone wrong in Ukraine. It's like talking to your crazy ex, right? This is the relationship that they have with Russia. Everything that's ever gone wrong in the history of Ukraine is to be blamed on the Russians. If it wasn't for the Russians, they'd be Switzerland. They'd be pure as the driven snow. And certainly they have reason to hate Russia, just like a lot of our neighboring countries and semi-neighboring countries have reason to hate us.
Right,
And do.
exactly.
And
Right.
do. Like we're not loved in most of South America and Central America. There's a fucking reason for that.
Right. Exactly. Exactly.
That is the position. Ukraine is in that position, and they have reason to feel this way about Russia. But this is not in our national interest. Not only is it not in our national interest, we have to understand that we are backing a power that does not care not only about our national interests, they don't care about the interests of the earth. one gets the sense from things like this. Look at what he did. Look at what he did.
Well, even if he didn't,
even
hold on,
I was going to say, even if they didn't intentionally fire it into Poland, even if that's not the case, look at how he spun it immediately, right?
Right. You're doubling and tripling down on a claim that, if taken seriously, will trigger a world war. No doubt about that.
Right.
No doubt about that. And so when we say you can't stop listening to Ukraine, this does not mean, in all seriousness, for YouTube and anyone else who's listening, and it's actually what I feel. We're not blaming the Ukrainians for what was done to them, right? But what we are saying is that the way I hesitate to say info wars, but the way the propaganda wars are going now, it's very clear that, like what Russell's saying is true, that Ukraine is taking this nationalist stand where they're like, we're going to win this now if the whole world has to end for it. I'm sorry, that's not an agreeable position to the rest of the world, and we ought to be allowed to say that, knowing that we are allowed to say that. Right.
Yes. And this is why not only should we not be listening to what Ukraine has to say about how this gets resolved, they are the last fucking people we should be listening to about how this gets resolved. They are not honest actors. And if there was any question about that, this should clear that up. The fact that Zelensky continues to claim that this was Russian, that he still won't give that up, what does that tell you about Zelensky? What does that tell you about the Ukrainian government? What does that tell you about allying with these people?
Yeah.
It is
and let's
extremely
just say,
dangerous to us, and it's extremely dangerous to the rest of the world.
Yeah. Yeah. And what NATO said there was actually very important. And what Poland said there was very important. And, because they said, look, this was a Ukrainian stray. Now, here, you want to look into this even deeper, right? You want to play the four-dimensional chess? Let's say that Zelensky is telling the truth. Let's say it was Russian, right? Let's just say that. Isn't it then interesting that Poland and NATO are saying, no, it wasn't? Because what that signals to you, and like I said, this is reading into it perhaps further than we have to, because in all likelihood, Poland is telling the truth. NATO is telling the truth. They wouldn't lie, right? But perhaps, let's say they would. Let's say they are going to deny that it was Russian, even if it was, for the sake of averting a world war, right? Like, that could be...
Yeah, I don't think that's what happened.
I don't think that's what happened. But even if that's what... But let's say that's what did happen. Either way, what you have here, very, very plainly, no matter what the facts of this are, and it seems very likely, according to mainstream reporting, like I said, the guy was fact-checked on Twitter, okay? We're not saying anything crazy here. It seems very likely that the facts are one way. Even if the facts are the other way, it's clear that I think the rest of the world is saying, hey, wait a minute. Let's take a step back here. We don't want a world war over this. Even Biden, it was reported, had a difficult phone call with Zelensky a few weeks back where he got hostile with him. He called him an ingrate, right? And he is a fucking ingrate.
He is.
We've sent you, what, $120 billion?
Yep.
Now, we sent you a generation's worth of community college tuition here in this country. We could have put a generation to school in this country for what we have sent to Ukraine. And so Biden's right to say he's a fucking ingrate. He is.
He is.
He absolutely is. So it seems obvious to me, even the West is starting to, I think, realize that, hey, listen, this can't go on forever, and we don't want this to escalate further. Because you're even seeing, and look, the way Biden handled this from the jump was awful. We've said so a million times. But if he's starting to have enough of this guy, that tells you something.
Well, every time you see him on camera, he's trying to start World War III or he's asking for more money.
Right.
That's it. We need another $70 billion for war. Like every time you see the guy, it's like where his father, and he's coming for his fucking trust fund.
Right.
Get the fuck out of here. And then you're gonna lie or possibly false flag attack a NATO country. This is crazy, man. We should have wrapped this up last year when we could have. And Boris Johnson went over there and put the kibosh on it. And now Zelensky's all in, and he is becoming an increasingly dangerous person to be listening to. We built him up. We put him on this pedestal. In the end, he's just a fucking corrupt clown. He's a corrupt clown. He appears in the Panama Papers. He has fucking offshore accounts. He's just as corrupt as the rest of, well, maybe not as corrupt. Maybe some of them have been more corrupt. Maybe slightly less corrupt, but that's the leper with the most fingers contest. He's fucking corrupt. This was not a country that had a really stable, functioning democracy before this. The idea that that's what we're rescuing is absurd. I'm not saying the country should be allowed to be overrun by the Russians, but I'm quite certain if we called up Russia tomorrow and said, hey, man, we're going to lift the sanctions. You take Crimea.
Russia's terms were not to overrun Ukraine. Russia never wanted their flag flying over Kiev. They've never demanded that. They're still not demanding that.
It's a pain in the ass for them, man. Then they got to occupy a hostile population. Like,
look,
come on.
What you said way at the start of this war, it was actually true, which is that this war really, from Russia's point of view, doesn't even seem to be about Ukraine. This seemed to be about forcing a conflict with the West that would force a realignment of global economic power.
Right.
That's really what it was. Right. So Ukraine is being used as a pawn by Russia just as much as it is by us.
That is the only area, I was going to say that is the only area where I'm a little sympathetic to Zelensky's constant requests for money and support. Because in the end, we're using Ukrainian lives to fight a realpolitik strategic game. So on that level, I feel like he has a right to ask for that money because we're using their country as a pawn in this game of risk.
Absolutely we are. Yes. But so is Russia. Ukraine is the forum for it, not just, you could say it's World War III, it's also Cold War II. Right? That's what's really going on here. What's really going on here is Russia wanted to create a conflict where certain economic powers had to take sides. They're either going to join with Russia or they're going to join with the West. That explains Russia's new partnership with China to create some new credit scheme, right? Brazil sided with Russia. India sided with Russia. They saw an opportunity here to take sort of to sort of turn a unipolar world into a multipolar world. And Ukraine was the venue for that. And that's why, we said at the very beginning, the Ukrainians have a right to defend their country. They were invaded. That's it. You have a right to defend, right?
Sure.
But to just act as if the world stops and starts with Ukraine is just maniacally selfish. I'm sorry. There are countries that have allied with Russia in the Southern Hemisphere, right underneath us. We have overthrown their governments. We have sanctioned them. We have starved their people. We have displaced their people, right? And if any of them actually went as far as to join a formal military alliance with Russia, there would be no Venezuela. If Mexico did that, there'd be no Mexico, right? And so you just have to understand, like this is why I said over and over again, this is not what about
well, in South
this is
Africa,
about
I think a lot of people don't know that. I didn't know that the Soviet state supported the uprisings against apartheid at a time when we were supporting apartheid.
Right.
So that's why the current government actually feels warmly towards Russia. Russia supported them in their hour of need. We didn't.
Well, look, Putin has the benefit of being able to red pill a lot of people, when it comes to just the evils of the West. He said something about the Japanese. He said, Japan is so in the pocket of the West, they don't even teach their children about the horrors of what the United States did to them when we dropped the 2 atom bombs on them. He says, they don't even tell you about that. That's how in the pocket of Western power they are. Like, the fucking guy, he dropped some red pills, just like Trump when, Trump was asked, what about Putin? Isn't he a killer? Well, we have a lot of killers over here, right? Like, there are certain people who are in positions to just speak about the West in terms that Western populations are not comfortable hearing about. And so this realignment of power obviously was not a delusion on Putin's part. He has gotten India to side with him. He's gotten China. He's gotten Brazil. These are major powers. These are major countries, right? And that was, I think, his real goal. And of course, it's horrible and tragic for Ukraine that this happened to them. But that's why we need a peace deal, right? We're not saying Russia, we're not saying give them the whole country. Russia doesn't want the whole country. What we're saying is there are terms here that could be met that would guarantee the safety of Ukraine first and the world. So let's meet those terms. And when you have this, when you have this guy here, Russia fired the missile. Even days after, every credible news outlet, all of the heads of state are saying, no, that's not what happened. He's still on this, as of a few hours ago today. I don't know. I haven't checked the phone in a few hours, but there was an article that came out this morning. He's still saying it. Yeah.
He is still making that claim. This is something about the Soviet Union I think we don't really have a lot of perspective on. And unlike some people, look, we get people who come on who are very much about, the evils of communism. And, personally, I'm not a communist. Keaton, maybe he's a little red, maybe, but personally, I'm not a communist. What happened in Russia, I would call it Stalinism. It was its own unique system. But if you ever watched the show The Americans, I thought it captured this very well, which was it was fictional, of two Russian spies living undercover as Americans in the United States, posing as Americans. And something it captured very well is that you have to remember, Russians didn't walk around like, yes, we are the evil empire. They had their own ideal. They had their own vision that a lot of the people, particularly the most devoted people, believed they were making a better world. They believed they were making a world where, the labor is not exploited and where imperialism is not the order of the day. And, you might say, well, they were the ultimate imperialist power. And they were, not the ultimate, but, they absorbed all these countries that clearly didn't want to be part of the Soviet Union. But they didn't see it that way. The way that they saw it was that they were liberating these people from the capitalist system and freeing the workers from oppression. So they didn't see themselves as an imperial power. So that's something you have to remember when you look at their support for the uprising in South Africa. Their self-image as a nation was very tied to this vision of people who support the underdogs, who support the oppressed, who support the exploited. So it's not as simple as, they were just these comic book villains, these Bond villains walking around in a frozen landscape, plotting ways to undermine everything that's good in the world. They saw themselves, like all countries do, as the good guys. And a lot of the people who worked for the regime and under the regime saw themselves as fighting against iniquity. And they saw us as the leader of a system of exploitation. And just like we are not completely, we have our own idealized vision of ourselves that is not always right, and their vision wasn't always right. Our vision's not always wrong, and neither was theirs.
Right. No, I think that was very well said. Absolutely. All right. Is that everything we got?
I think so.
I think that's everything we got, everybody. So I'm going to put our patrons on the scroll one more time here. We want to thank all of our supporters at patreon.com/do
Anyone wants to throw up some of those super chats, we'll read them.
We'll read them.
You got it before the window closes.
Right. Last call for super chats, everybody. I'm going to put up the link to our Patreon here. I'm also going to put up the link to our Substack, dodissidents.substack.com. Even if you cannot sign up as a paid Substack subscriber, if you could sign up for free, that helps you keep in touch with us. You get all of our podcasts, videos, and articles. We should have an article drop either this evening or tomorrow. I should get to it this evening, though.
Godzilla made them
Russell
do it.
has one coming out.
You know what, Carrie? I was so disappointed when Japan. Did anyone else feel this way when Japan had a nuclear meltdown, and there were no giant reptiles after that? There were no giant moths. I felt like the movies had promised us if there was a nuclear accident in Japan, we were going to get giant reptiles, and nothing.
Yeah.
That was one of the greatest disappointments of my life.
Well, when did Godzilla come out? Godzilla was post-war, wasn't it?
1956.
Yeah, so it was post-war. It was post-war. Oh, you're saying so there could have been a giant reptile that was sort of incubating at that time.
Well, no, they just had a big meltdown, and all of those movies kind of promised us if you Japan plus nuclear radiation equals Godzilla.
Oh, I see what
Rodan,
you're saying.
Mothra.
I see what you're saying.
None of that ensued. As soon as I heard about that meltdown, I said, "Hot damn, we're finally gonna get giant reptiles."
Okay, so this is more recent you were talking about.
Yeah, not one.
Got
one.
it.
Oh, 1954. Look, David one-upped me there.
Yeah, I knew it was 50s. I knew it was post-war. I mean, that's really what Godzilla is.
I was close.
It's about the bomb. All right, everybody. So this stream and subscribe to our channel. I think most of you guys here are subscribers, but subscribe if you haven't. Go ahead. What were you saying?
Virtuoso wants to weigh in.
Where's Virtuoso? I don't see Virtuoso nowhere.
Backstage.
Oh, there you are.
Guys.
Oh, sorry. I didn't even see you there. Because my screen here, Virtuoso is a call. He's one of our patrons. Or are you Substack, Virtuoso?
No, it's Patreon. Yeah, Patreon.
It is Patreon. And what's your actual name, if you don't mind?
David.
All right.
Mm-hmm.
And what's your last initial? Because I don't know if you're on the scroll because you only have a screen name. Are you on the scroll?
Not that I know of.
What's your last initial? What's your last initial? I'll put you up.
R.
David R. Wait a minute. Are you David Ruiz?
Yes.
Oh, wow. So interesting. So see, I figured it out. How do you like that? How's that for detective work? Because you've been one of our fans for a very long time.
Yeah,
you've been watching us forever. But I always knew you as David. I didn't know who Virtuoso was.
Back when, if anyone wants to laugh,
because I use it as an alias. Because I listen. I use
cover's blown now
very frequently, but I don't want to deal with freaks online. So of course I have to use an alias.
You're in the wrong place, my friend.
Fair enough. Yeah.
Oh, God damn it.
We got into the online freaks business.
Yeah.
But yeah.
Am I still on? Did I hit something on my mic? Can you hear me?
Yeah,
I can hear you.
Okay, good. No, I thought I turned my mic off because I gripped it. Anyway, so that's great to know. That's interesting. All right. See, we put that together.
All right.
All right. What's on your mind? Sorry.
No, I just want to talk real quick about around the controversy around blacks and anti-Semitism. There's an episode of this podcast that I also watch. It's called This is Revolution Podcast. Mm-hmm. And one of the co-hosts, his name is Pascal Robert, and he says something really that really clicks to me. It's like, as long as you view capitalism to a cultural lens, you're always going to have Jews on the brain. Like all this emphasis on basically race essentialism, and all this mixed with social justice can really lead people astray if they don't talk about the material conditions, how to free people and put power to them, in an economic manner, rather than just dealing with this oppression syndrome that blacks been having towards the Jews. Because even though they did have a disadvantage in terms of education, notice that they have been enslaved for most of the 18th century, and throughout most of before American history, but up to like halfway through the 20th century, if we're gonna disregard the plantation, there's also incarceration. There's that, but so it's a very touchy subject, and I think people need to be mindful of how they address this subject. But they have to understand the history, between the conflict, especially in New York City, because it is a culture of of a get back rather, and trying to basically present themselves as a chosen one. And that was one of the things that Pascal Robert and his co-host talked about with another guest. But I'll link you the episode because they have one on Facebook that they uploaded. But I actually wanted to touch on what Kyrie Irving and what he went through. But you have to understand that Kyrie Irving is not at any point in time a victim. However, what I don't like is basically how very standard formation the companies act in a way like they're very swift with their punishment. They don't like controversy. They have a weak stomach for it. But one of the things I've noticed.
Well, you talk about capitalism through a culture lens. I mean, there's a good example of it, right? The incentive is for the corporation to just get rid of the controversy, not to talk it out, right? The incentive for capital is to smooth it over immediately. Quick. We can't take the bad PR, right? Anyway, sorry.
Exactly. Yeah, and so Kyrie Irving did share an image of the movie that I guess he watched. And the thing that bothers me is how people basically overreacted to it. I just don't buy into the narrative that basically tweeting an image of a controversial movie that Amazon basically facilitated and profit off of is somehow having a placebo effect on people. Because you remember when all the blogosphere went nuts over the Joker movie and how that was going to lead to
violence.
The incels were gonna
incel revolution, and incel vanguard, basically. So there's that term. Sorry.
No, you're good. Funny story about the Joker movie, real quick. I saw that movie when I was working a show by myself in Vermont. My kids were like 6 months old, so I didn't take the family with me because it would have been a pain in the ass to travel with the group. So I went up to Vermont by myself, and I missed the showing one night. So I went to the movie theater and I bought a ticket for the Joker for tomorrow's showing when everybody was afraid. Like, oh, here's this white kid coming in by himself, buying one ticket to tomorrow's screening of the Joker. I'm like, oh my God, are the cops going to show up at my hotel? Are they going to report me? Anyway, go ahead.
Yeah, it's just nuts how people just kind of piled on him. But like, it just goes to show, like, listen, we shouldn't look to professional athletes for moral guidance or anything of the sorts in terms of wisdom,
or actors,
because this is the same guy who thought the Earth was flat. All right.
Yep. Right.
So
right.
That should tell you much.
Look, I used to, when I drove a horse and carriage in Times Square, I would very often be set up next to the black Israelites, who I think that's what that movie is about. It's their theory that they're the actual lost tribes. And yeah, man, I mean, I used to, I'm gonna get killed now because I used to fuck with them all the time. I used to yell at them. Would you guys flunk the entrance exam for the Nation of Islam? They would stare like daggers at me. But yeah, man, I mean, they're fucking crazy racists. Like, their basic theory of the world is really, it makes the Nation of Islam look reasonable.
Yeah, it basically just bigotry.
That's it. It's just a lot of racism, not just against white people, but a lot of general racism. You know, like their 12 tribes are basically like everyone who's not white, essentially, are the real 12 tribes of Israel. Like Puerto Ricans get in there as Israelites, like everybody. But so yeah, man, I'm sure this film is like batshit crazy. You know what I would watch on Amazon and what I would recommend? This is very interesting if you want to get a perspective on African American thought that you're not getting from corporate media, from mainstream outlets. There's a documentary on there called Uncle Tom that's about Black conservatives. And there is a long tradition of a kind of strain of Black conservatism that, you know, not to mention bring up a bad name, but Bill Cosby was very emblematic of this strain of Black conservatism. The like kind of be self-sufficient and self-reliant and take care of yourself, and
Yeah, it was up until Bill Cosby and his controversies that I started learning the term respectability politics.
Right.
I mean, yeah, look, these are two sides of the same coin. Like, this is a product because, look, I'm against censorship across the board. I'm just against cancellation and shutting people out of spaces across the board. The problem is the incentive structure within capitalism. I mean, that is the big problem here, because what we're seeing here, this cancellation is the flip side of corporate responsibility, social responsibility, right? So Nike, Apple, if they come out after George Floyd is murdered and they say, at this company, we think Black Lives Matter, right? They are now entering the realm of politics and the realm of culture where corporations in a sane society do not belong, because a society not totally brainwashed by capitalism and by neoliberalism, any sane person looks at a corporation and says, this entity exists to turn a profit, period. They do not exist to change the world for the better or for the worse. They exist to make a profit. But once they dip their toes in saying Black Lives Matter, now they are on the hook. When one of their sponsors goes off the reservation and says something crazy, they have to shut them down because they've already created this perception that they are somehow political actors, when really they're not. They're money-making machines. That's all they are. That's why all of this talk about corporate, virtue and social responsibility, it's all crap. It's all crap. When you go to business school, you get a business degree, right? What that is a 4-year program of gaslighting people into thinking that corporations exist for any other reason but to make money, right? Everything else is nonsense. It's bullshit. But they've already created that impression. They have no choice now but to double down on it.
Right. Well, I always forget his whole name. Bankman-Fried, this motherfucker, with the FX crypto. He was a perfect example of what a con that is. Like he in an interview actually said that all of the woke virtue signaling is actually a way of telling the people in power that you're going to play ball. It's telling them that you're one of them, that you're in the club. And I think we all sense that. I think that's a big part of why the population is so hostile towards it, because it's so clearly some kind of like Masonic handshake to indicate that you're one of the elect, right? I mean, that's why the concepts are so bizarre in the way of a religion, right? Because that's the function that serves, to show that you're one of the initiated, that you have absorbed all this bizarre mythology that defies common sense. And he said it straight out, like, yeah. And, this is somebody who was giving money to the Democratic Party tremendously, but also through his right-hand man, it's coming out now, was giving money to the Republicans. And all of it was just about getting legislation favorable to moving their crypto exchange into the United States, which they were on the verge of doing. A letter leaked and caused basically a run on the bank. That's it. That's what brought down this whole house of cards. But it was basically running a big pyramid scheme that was right on the verge of becoming legalized in the United States.
Yeah. So yeah, man. Just in short, man, it's like if people are gonna go after Kyrie, at least go after Amazon Prime Video or Amazon, which I call fucking the Netflix, because they have so much right wing trash. In that
but but you know what? Free speech, man. God bless them.
Yeah,
I would much rather that than to hear they pulled it down under pressure.
Yeah, exactly.
I am sure the same people who would want D'Souza pulled down would want that Uncle Tom documentary pulled down because it doesn't fit the narrative.
Right.
Yeah, and I learned a lot from watching that documentary.
Well, I mean, this is, like I said, this is where the profit motive just distorts a lot of these judgments. Because look, without getting into specifics, and you'll understand why in just a second, Fox News talks about all kinds of shit on a regular basis that nobody else is allowed to talk about on social media.
Tucker
you will get blocked.
Whole thing
you will
about
get
the
banned.
Ukrainian false flag. You think you're going to see that on MSNBC, on CNN?
some scene partner you are. I just said without getting into specifics, and then you go ahead. What's the number one rule?
Hang on.
Listen,
I've been waiting
here,
to drop
Devin,
this on Virtuosa. Devin says you sound like a cop who just did a cocaine bust and needs to go home because his fellow cop told him he looks like shit.
Yeah. Devin is an actor. He gives us acting advice, or she. Devin, are you a man or a woman? Or neither?
Yeah,
Let us know. So I know I had to refer to you.
That's very specific.
Yeah. But one of the other
a resident theater geek.
No, but anyway, like
Exactly.
Fox News regularly talked about shit that people are just not allowed to talk about online. And so if they are allowed to talk about it, why aren't they getting kicked off social media? Why aren't they getting demonetized on these video platforms? Like, why not? Now, I'm not saying they should. I'm saying but there has to be uniformity. There has to be fairness and transparency. Like, if they're allowed to run their mouths about shit, then everybody should be able to run their mouths about shit. Right? What is the difference? The difference is they have money. They bring in money for these platforms, whereas small channels and small social media, handles don't. Right? An account with 5,000 followers, they can get rid of them. It's not a big deal.
Well, that's
right?
why I keep saying we get flagged on clips, but you must be able to show clips once they're making real money off you, man, because I watch all kinds of shit. If they got 1 million subscribers, they're showing all these clips, man. They can't be getting demonetized every time they drop one of those clips, or they wouldn't do it.
Yeah, absolutely. I got to read this. Ryan says, could you tell us about the Jimmy Dore story you've hinted at before? What do you know? I have no inside knowledge about Jimmy Dore, Ryan. I don't have anything.
He has a Michael Brooks story.
Yeah, it's related to Michael Brooks. I'll just say very, very quickly, we could get into more detail about this another time. I don't want to set off a whole thing now because we have to wrap soon. But when Michael Brooks passed, Jimmy Dore was the only one of his peers that did not say they were sorry, basically. And I thought that was kind of low and kind of petty.
Well, you said somebody on the show started to go there and he shut it down.
Well, no, they had chats coming in to his live stream a couple days after Michael died. And actually, David, Virtuoso, you actually called into our Facebook stream about this very thing. I don't know if you remember that. It was about a year ago. But it's funny that you're here now because you remember that live stream. And now, do you want to hang up? Because if we go any further, the freaks are going to come at you, just like they're going to come after us. If you're trying
this is what I mean.
If you're trying to insulate yourself from freaks, now might be the time to say see you later. What's that?
No, Devin's just over there doing Alexander technique. And
yeah, no, he had, look, Michael and Jimmy did not like each other. They were very open about the fact that they did not like each other. But when Michael died, Jimmy clearly avoided saying we're sorry for his passing, and he clearly avoided that. He had people giving super chats on the stream asking him to bring it up, and it was very clear that they made the conscious choice not to. And whether you like the guy or not, he died at 37 years old, right? Have some fucking humanity.
Have some class.
There were other people who
Show
didn't
some class.
There were other people who didn't like Michael either. What's his name? Jamal Thomas. Who has a, smaller channel, but he's still out there. He used to call Michael Brooks Sam Cedar's work wife. He used to make fun of him. He didn't like him either. Okay, it's fine. You know what? The guy was 36, 37. When he died, Jamal Thomas took 5 minutes to say, this is a horrible tragedy. We're very sorry for him and everyone in his life. That's just like the human thing to do. And Jimmy didn't do it. And I think that's fucked up. I think that's pretty
fuck
dark.
Jimmy Dore. But, he's allowed to say shit, to talk his shit. But you know what? Fuck that. Fuck him for that.
Yeah, I mean, that's just a low thing to do.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Well, guys, I got to go. I just missed a phone call while we were talking.
That's all right. Really just make sure you come back because that little talk we just had there, the last 3 minutes probably just cost us about 1,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
The channel's just going to totally tank because we told that story. So thank you, Ryan, for the $5.
Come back for our Miami night.
Yeah,
exactly.
and I'll link into that episode, that podcast episode. It was really informative, really, really funny. So
yeah, send it to us. I would love to listen to it. I've not heard of that show before. So yeah, send it.
Yeah. They're very good on YouTube. It's called This Is Revolution.
Okay, great. I will look it up. Our Twitch audience is here. I think Nikki did us a favor and did her Twitch magic. So thank you guys for joining. Hey, Nikki.
And there's one more super chat.
Your mama's so fat now with $5. Thank you very much, Wolfstead. We appreciate that. Yeah, Nikki, thank you so much for plugging our Twitch channel. if you could, I mean, if you would be willing to tutor us for like 10 minutes on how to work Twitch, we would much appreciate that. So if you, because we have no idea.
I always say I'm old, Keaton's Amish.
I mean, I have no idea how to do it. Like zero. Like we just literally created a Twitch channel just because we had multi-streaming abilities. We're like, yeah, we may as well. But yeah, we are going to wrap the show in just a moment, but we just wanted to stick around and say a few things here, hang out with you guys a little bit. Do we have anything else?
No, I think that's it.
All right, I think that's everything. All right, well, this was a fun one. Thank you guys for hanging out with us. We're glad we got to chat with you guys a little bit after the segments were done. Once again, patreon.com/DoDissidents to help support the show. And we will see you guys back here Sunday nights, 7 p.m. So now we basically have our streaming schedule finalized. Sundays at 7, Thursdays at 4. That's basically the schedule, unless something happens that we have to change it, but that's going to be rare. As of now, you could all pretty much count on us being here Sunday at 7 and Thursday at 4. Thank you guys very much for watching. Thanks to our podcast listeners for listening. This will be up on the feed probably tomorrow or Saturday. Be safe. Be well. We'll see you guys back here Sunday. Have a great evening.
Good night and good luck.
Good night and good luck.
Please clap.